On the Thursday that changed my life forever, my boss looked me in the eyes and said, "Helena, you're invisible here. You always have been. 43 years old, 22 years at the same company." And that was the first time anyone had told me the truth about myself. The truth hurts, but lies kill you slowly, like poison you take drop by drop thinking it's medicine. There's a brutal difference between being humble and being invisible. Humility is a virtue you choose. Invisibility is a prison you build brick by brick, silence by silence, excuse by excuse. For over 2 decades, I confused one with the other. I thought being the employee who never bothered anyone, who always said yes, who solved everything behind the scenes without fanfare, was the path to success. I discovered too late that the path to success requires the courage to be seen, heard, and respected. Maybe you're like I was, the person who arrives early and leaves late, who takes on responsibilities no one wants, who smiles when they should question, who apologizes when they should assert themselves. If that's you, this story is for you. Because I learned that there comes a moment in life when you need to choose between continuing to be convenient for others or starting to be essential for yourself. Invisibility isn't an accident. It's a choice we make every day, word by word, action by action, silence by silence. And if it's a choice, it can be changed, but it requires something most people aren't willing to pay: the price of inconveniencing others, of questioning, of occupying the space that is rightfully yours. Helena Carvalho had a routine so precise it could be used to calibrate clocks. Every day at 7:15 a.m. she entered Cromwell & Associates, a business consulting firm downtown, greeted the receptionist with the same polite "Good morning," and went up to the 12th floor where she occupied a desk in the corner of the room, far from the windows and spotlights. For 22 years, Helena was the perfect definition of the model employee. Punctual, dedicated, competent, and above all, silent. She was the type of person who solved problems without making a fuss, who took on extra responsibilities without asking for a raise, who worked weekends without complaining. In her mind, this was the formula for success. In reality, it was the recipe for mediocrity. On that Thursday in March, everything changed. Ricardo Mendoza, director of the company for 5 years, called Helena for a private conversation. She imagined it was about the quarterly report she had finished the night before, or perhaps about the new project she was coordinating. She never imagined it would be about herself. "Helena," Ricardo said, adjusting his glasses and looking directly into her eyes, "I need to be honest with you. You're invisible here. You always have been, and that has become a problem." The words fell like stones in still water. Helena felt her stomach turn but maintained her composure. It was what she always did: maintain composure, not cause embarrassment, not make waves. "I don't understand," she murmured, the words coming out almost as a whisper. Ricardo leaned back in his chair, with the expression of someone about to explain something obvious that should have been said long ago. "Helena, when was the last time you gave an opinion in a meeting? When was the last time you disagreed with something? When was the last time you proposed a new idea?" He paused, letting the questions echo in the air. "You do the work, and you do it well, but you don't exist as a professional. It's like you're an efficient ghost." Helena felt her cheeks burn. Throughout all these years, she believed that being discreet was a quality, that not bothering anyone was synonymous with professionalism, that doing work without drawing attention was what the company expected from her. Ricardo continued, "The market has changed, Helena. Today we need people who lead, who innovate, who have presence. You have knowledge, but knowledge kept in a drawer is useless." "But I've always delivered everything on time," Helena said, her voice still low, still controlled. "There have never been complaints about my work," Ricardo sighed. "And that's exactly the problem. You deliver, but you don't add value. You execute, but you don't propose. You've been here for over 20 years, but you still act like an intern waiting for permission to exist. The conversation lasted another 20 minutes, but Helena couldn't process much of what was said after those first sentences. Her mind was occupied reliving 2 decades of silences, of lost opportunities, of moments when she had a better idea, but preferred to stay quiet. It was as if she were watching a movie of her own life and finally understanding that she had been a supporting character in her own story. When Helena returned to her desk, the office seemed different. The same people doing the same things, but now she saw with new eyes. She observed Marina, the project coordinator, presenting a proposal confidently to a group of colleagues. She noticed how C. Arlos, from sales, interrupted meetings to give suggestions, even when no one had asked for his opinion. She saw how Patricia, who had been hired only 3 years ago, already occupied a leadership position. The difference wasn't competence. Helena knew she understood the business better than most of them. The difference was presence. They occupied space. She just occupied a chair. They spoke. She only answered when asked. They proposed. She only executed. During lunch, Helena did something she hadn't done in years. Instead of eating alone at her desk, she went to the cafeteria and sat with a group of colleagues. "May I sit here?" she asked, holding her tray with slightly trembling hands. Marina looked up, surprised. "Of course, Helena. Good to see you here." The conversation was lively about a new client the company had acquired. Helena listened attentively, and F, for the first time in years, had the courage to give an opinion. "You know," she said, interrupting gently, "I worked with a company from the same sector a few years ago. They have some peculiarities that perhaps you should consider in your approach." The group stopped to listen to her, and Helena felt something strange. She was being seen. Really seen. Not as the woman who made reports, but as a professional with valuable knowledge to share. That night, Helena arrived home with a strange feeling in her chest. It was a mixture of anxiety and excitement, as if she had discovered a superpower she always had but never knew how to use. She lived alone in an organized and quiet apartment, a perfect reflection of her personality. Everything in the right place, nothing drawing unnecessary attention. She prepared chamomile tea and sat in the living room armchair where she usually read before bed. But this time, instead of opening a book, she opened an old notebook she had received as a gift years ago and had never used. On the first page, she wrote, "Things I always knew, but never said." The list she began to make was surprisingly long. She knew the company's filing system was inefficient and could be improved, but never suggested changes. She knew some processes could be automated, saving hours of manual work, but never proposed anything. She knew she had ideas to improve customer service, but always kept those ideas to herself. Page after page, Helena discovered she had much more strategic knowledge than she imagined. "Why did I never say any of this?" she asked aloud, her own voice echoing in the silent apartment. The answer came like a punch to the stomach. Because she was afraid. Afraid of being wrong, afraid of seeming presumptuous, afraid of bothering, afraid of being rejected. For 22 years, fear had been her most authoritarian boss. Helena closed the notebook and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. While chopping vegetables for the salad, she reflected on how she had wasted so much time being small when she could have been great. Not great in the sense of arrogant or overbearing, but great in the sense of present, relevant, indispensable. On Friday, Helena arrived at the office with a different energy. It wasn't confidence yet, but it was determination. During the weekly team meeting, when Ricardo asked if anyone had suggestions for optimizing the quarter's processes, Helena took a deep breath and raised her hand. 3 weeks ago, she would have remained silent even though she had clear ideas on the subject. "I have some observations," she said, her voice coming out firmer than she expected. "I've been observing some bottlenecks in our processes, and I believe we have opportunities for improvement." Ricardo looked at her with genuine interest, and Helena felt he had the room's attention. For the next 10 minutes, she presented 3 specific proposals based on her experience of more than 2 decades at the company. Her suggestions weren't just valid, they were brilliant. She proposed a restructuring of the project approval flow that could reduce customer response time by 40%. She suggested implementing an internal feedback system that would improve communication between TWE and teams. And she presented an idea for a mentoring program that would leverage the experience of senior employees to develop newer ones. When Helena finished speaking, there was a moment of silence in the room. Not an embarrassing silence, but a silence of recognition. Marina was the first to react. "Helena, this is fantastic. Why haven't you shared these ideas before?" The question Helena didn't want to answer but needed to face. "Because," Helena said, choosing her words carefully, "I thought my role was just to execute, not to propose." Ricardo leaned forward in his chair. "Helena, you've been here for over 20 years. You know this company better than any of us. Your ideas aren't just welcome, they're necessary." In the weeks that followed, Helena began to experience something completely new. Relevance. Her proposals were approved and implemented. The internal feedback system she suggested showed positive results in less than a month. The mentoring program she conceived was embraced by more experienced employees who finally saw a way to share knowledge in a structured manner. But the most significant change wasn't happening in the company's processes. It was happening in Helena. For the first time in decades, she looked in the mirror and saw a competent professional, not just an obedient employee. She began arriving at the office not just to complete tasks, but to actively contribute ideas and solutions. During a meeting with an important client, Helena did something that would have been unthinkable months ago. She politely disagreed with an approach proposed by Ricardo himself. "With all due respect," she said, "I believe this strategy may not be the most suitable for this client's profile." She then explained her reasons and proposed an alternative based on her experience. The client not only agreed with Helena, but praised her analysis. After the meeting, Ricardo called her aside. Helena prepared for a reprimand, but received something completely different. Recognition. "Helena, you surprised me today. Your intervention saved the meeting. If you hadn't spoken up, we could have lost this client." At that moment, Helena understood something fundamental about leadership and professional presence. It's not about being the loudest person in the room, but about being the person who adds the most value. It's not about speaking louder, but about speaking at the right time. And sometimes the right time is when you disagree with who's in charge. Helena's transformation didn't go unnoticed by her colleagues. Some were genuinely impressed with her contributions and began seeking her out to exchange ideas. Others, however, reacted with resistance and even hostility. Carlos, who had always dominated meetings with his expansive personality, made a snide comment during a coffee break. "Interesting how some people discover they have a voice after decades of silence." Helena felt the blow, but this time she reacted differently. Instead of withdrawing and returning to silence, she responded calmly. "Carlos, you're right. It took me a long time to realize I had important things to say." "Better late than never, isn't it?" TUE response surprised everyone, including Helena. She had found a way to defend herself without being aggressive, to position herself without being arrogant. Patricia, the coordinator who had quickly risen in the company, had a different reaction. After a meeting where Helena had presented a particularly insightful analysis, she approached her. "Helena, can I ask you something? What changed in you? I mean, you were always competent, but now you seem present." Patricia's question made Helena reflect on her journey. "I think I was always present," she replied, "but I was present as a shadow. Now I'm present as a person." They talked for almost an hour, and Helena realized she was doing something new, mentoring a younger colleague, sharing not just technical knowledge, but life experience. This conversation marked another milestone in Helena's transformation. She began to see that her experience, those 22 years she sometimes saw as wasted time, were actually a treasure of knowledge that few in the company possessed. She didn't need to compete with the youthful energy of younger colleagues. She had something they didn't have: perspective. 3 months after the conversation that changed everything, Helena received an unexpected invitation to participate in a panel about silent leadership at an industry congress. The irony wasn't lost on her. For decades, she had been too silent. Now she was being invited to speak about silent leadership. The difference, she realized, was subtle but fundamental. Silent leadership doesn't mean being invisible. It means leading through consistent actions, deep knowledge, and genuine influence without needing spotlights or constant recognition. It was what she could have been all those years, but never was, because he confused strategic silence with silence from fear. The night before the presentation, Helena rehearsed in front of her bedroom mirror, something she had never done before. "My name is Helena Carvalho," she said to her own reflection, "and for 22 years I was the most competent and invisible professional in my company. Today I'm here to talk about the difference between leading in silence and disappearing in silence." The panel was a success. Helena spoke for 20 minutes to an audience of over 200 executives, sharing her story of personal and professional transformation. For the first time in her life, she was literally in the spotlight and discovered that he not only could handle it, but also enjoyed it. During the Q&A session, an executive asked, "Helena, what was the exact moment when you decided to change?" She thought for a moment before answering. "It wasn't a decision, it was an awakening. I realized I had spent decades waiting for someone to give me permission to be relevant. No one is going to give you that permission. You have to take it for yourself." The success at the Congress opened doors Helena never imagined possible. Competing companies began approaching her with job offers. Speaking invitations arrived regularly. Her LinkedIn profile, which for years had only basic information, now received messages from headhunters and industry colleagues wanting to exchange experiences. But the most significant change happened within Cromwell and Associates itself. Ricardo called her for a conversation, and this time Helena entered the room without anxiety. "Helena," he said, "I want to propose something. How about creating a new position for you? Director of Organizational Development. You would be responsible for optimizing processes, developing internal talent, and leading transformation projects." The proposal included a 60% salary increase and a team of 4 people. Helena listened to everything in silence, but this time it was strategic silence, not from fear. She was processing the offer, thinking about the implications, evaluating if it was what she really wanted. When Ricardo finished, she asked a question that surprised him. "Ricardo, may I have a weekend to consider the proposal?" 2 years ago, Helena would have accepted immediately, grateful for the opportunity and afraid of losing it. Now she knew her own value and wasn't afraid to negotiate. During the weekend, she researched market salaries for similar positions, talked with industry contacts, and mainly reflected on whether this was the direction she wanted for her career. On Monday, Helena returned to the office with a counterproposal. She would accept the position, but wanted complete autonomy to structure the team, budget to implement necessary changes, and a seat on the company's executive committee. "Helena," Ricardo said, smiling, "you finally understand how to play the game." The transition to the new role wasn't easy. Helena discovered that leading people was very different from leading projects. Some employees resisted the changes she proposed. Others questioned her authority, especially those who had known her since the days when she was just a silent analyst. The biggest challenge came from Marina, who had hoped to be promoted to a similar position. During a team meeting, Marina made a sarcastic comment. "It's interesting how some people manage to reinvent their own history overnight." Helena felt the tension in the room, everyone waiting to see how she would react. She took a deep breath and responded calmly. "Marina, you're right. I did reinvent myself, and I continue reinventing myself every day. I hope all of you do the same, because that's how we grow." She then directed the meeting to the team's objectives, showing leadership by not prolonging an unproductive conflict. After the meeting, Helena sought Marina for a private conversation. "Marina, I can see you're bothered by my promotion. Can we talk about it?" The conversation that followed was difficult but productive. Marina admitted she felt undervalued and didn't understand how Helena had come out of nowhere to a leadership position. "Marina," Helena said, "I didn't come out of nowhere. I've been here for 22 years, observing, learning, and growing silently. The difference is that now I'm using what I learned." She offered to mentor Marina and promised to support her in developing her own career. The resistance began to transform into collaboration. 6 months in the new position brought concrete results that no one could ignore. Employee turnover dropped 35%. Customer satisfaction increased significantly. The processes Helena implemented saved time and resources. More importantly, she had created a culture where other people felt encouraged to share ideas and take initiatives. During the company's semi-annual evaluation, the corporate CEO came to visit the branch. Helena was invited to present her department's results. While preparing the presentation, she remembered the woman she was a year ago. Competent but invisible, knowledgeable but silent, valuable but underestimated. The presentation to the CEO was a moment of personal and professional glory. Helena presented data, success stories, and future plans with a confidence she never knew she possessed. The CEO was so impressed that he asked directly, "Helena, why didn't we know your potential before?" She could have given a diplomatically vague answer, but chose honesty. "Because I didn't know how to communicate my value. For years, I confused humility with invisibility. I learned that it's possible to be humble and visible at the same time." The CEO laughed and said, "Well, now you're definitely visible and valuable." After the meeting, Ricardo congratulated her. "Helena, you haven't just transformed yourself, you've transformed the entire company culture. People who used to stay quiet now participate, propose, lead." Helena smiled, knowing she had created something bigger than her own success. She had created an environment where other people could also discover and use their own voices. A year after her promotion, Helena received a phone call that would again change the course of her life. It was a headhunter from a multinational company offering a position as vice president of organizational transformation. The salary was almost double what she earned, and the responsibility included leading changes in 5 different countries. The Helena of 2 years ago would have been paralyzed by such a proposal. How could she, a woman who had been invisible for decades, take on a position of such responsibility? But the Helena of now evaluated the proposal with the perspective of someone who knows their own value and isn't afraid of big challenges. During the selection process, which lasted 3 months, Helena faced situations that would have terrified her before. She presented strategies to an international board via video conference. She led workshops with executives from different cultures. She negotiated contract terms with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what they're worth. When she received confirmation that she had gotten the position, Helena felt a mixture of pride and gratitude. Pride for the journey she had traveled, gratitude for the lessons learned. She called Ricardo to inform him of her departure from Cromwell and Associates. "I'll miss you," he said. "You've become indispensable here." "Ricardo," Helena replied, "thank you for being honest with me that Thursday. Without your brutal honesty, I never would have discovered who I really am as a professional." The conversation ended with an invitation to lunch when she was more established in the new position, to share experiences and maintain the professional networking she had finally learned to value. The farewell from Cromwell and Associates was a surreal experience for Helena. For 22 years she had gone unnoticed. Now her departure was being treated as a significant event. Colleagues who barely spoke to her before now made a point of saying goodbye and wishing HR success. Marina, who initially resisted her leadership, organized a farewell lunch. During lunch, Patricia made a toast. To Helena, who taught us that it's never too late to find our own voice. The words touched Helena deeply, not just for the recognition, but for the realization that her transformation had inspired other people to also reinvent themselves. Carlos, the colleague who had made sarcastic comments about her change, approached her on the last day. "Helena, I need to admit something. For years I dominated meetings not because I had the best ideas, but because I spoke louder than everyone else. You taught me that presence isn't about volume, it's about relevance." Carlos's confession was a moment of reciprocity. Just as Helena had learned to have a voice, he had learned to use his more strategically. Her transformation had created a domino effect, inspiring others to also reflect on their own ways of communicating and leading. On the last day, Helena cleaned her desk, no longer the corner desk, but a central desk with a view of the city, and packed in a box not just personal belongings, but memories of a journey of self-discovery. Among the items was the notebook where she had written, "Things I always knew, but never said." Now it weighs full of notes, implemented ideas, and achieved accomplishments. The new position brought challenges Helena had never imagined facing. Leading teams in different time zones, navigating distinct corporate cultures, implementing changes in resistant organizations. But each challenge also brought growth. Helena discovered she had not just technical competence, but also the ability to inspire people and lead complex transformations. During her first global meeting as VP, Helena introduced herself to more than 50 executives from 5 different countries. "My name is Helena Carvalho," she said. "And for the past 23 years, I've learned that competence without communication is wasted talent. I'm here to ensure our organization doesn't waste any talent." In the first 6 months, Helena implemented development programs that identified and developed hidden talents throughout the organization. She created communication channels that allowed employees at all levels to contribute ideas. She established metrics that measured not just results, but also engagement and innovation. The results were extraordinary. The company identified potential leaders who were being underutilized. Innovations emerged from departments that were previously considered merely operational. The organizational climate improved significantly, and this was reflected in financial results. During a video conference with the global CEO, he commented, "Helena, you haven't just brought results. You've brought a new way of thinking about human development in organizations. How did you develop this vision?" Helena smiled before answering, "Through personal experience. I know exactly what it's like to have unrecognized potential, and I know exactly how liberating it is when that potential is finally seen and developed." 2 years in the new position established Helena as a reference in organizational transformation. She began receiving invitations to lecture at universities, write articles for specialized magazines, and participate in podcasts about leadership. Her personnel story, the woman who discovered her voice at 43, became a case study taught in MBA programs. During a lecture at the university where she had graduated 25 years ago, Helena met her former advisor, Professor Antonia. "Helena, I always knew you had special potential, but I confess I worried about your tendency to hide," the professor said. "I'm glad to see you found your strength." The conversation with the professor made Helena reflect on how many people throughout her life had seen her potential, but she herself couldn't see it. Parents, teachers, some colleagues, all had given signs that she could be more than she was, but she had chosen the comfort of invisibility instead of the risk of exposure. Helena began developing her own philosophy about leadership and personal development. She called it emergent leadership, the idea that within each person there's a leader waiting to emerge, but who often remains dormant due to fear, lack of opportunity, or mainly lack of self-knowledge. This philosophy became the basis of a book Helena decided to write. The Chosen Invisibility: How to Stop Being a Supporting Character in Your Own Life became a bestseller in the professional and personal development category. The book combined her personal experience with insights about organizational psychology and practical strategies for leadership development. The book's success opened doors to a new phase of Helena's career: independent strategic consulting. She left the corporate position to create her own consulting company, focused on identifying and developing hidden leadership in organizations of all sizes. The irony didn't go unnoticed. The woman who had been invisible for decades was now helping other people become visible. Her first client was, surprisingly, Cromwell and Associates itself. Ricardo approached her 6 months after her departure. "Helena, since you left, we've lost 3 important talents to competitors. They said they didn't feel valued here. We need your help to identify and retain the talents we have." The consulting lasted 4 months and resulted in identifying 15 employees with leadership potential who were being underutilized. During the project, Helena reunited with Marina, who now occupied a general coordination position. "Helena," Marina said during a break, "I want to thank you. You taught me that questioning isn't disrespectful, it's necessary. Since our conversation, I've gotten 2 promotions, and I'm leading a team of 12 people." It was gratifying to see how her own transformation had inspired and facilitated the transformation of others. The work at Cromwell was so successful that other companies began seeking Helena. In 2 years, her consulting firm had served more than 50 organizations, from startups to multinationals. Each project reinforced her conviction that the business world was full of hidden talents waiting for someone who knew how to identify and develop them. 5 years after leaving corporate life, Helena had built not just a successful company, but a movement. Her emergent leadership methodology was being applied in universities, NGOs, and even government agencies. She had trained more than 200 consultants in her methodology and created an impact that went far beyond financial results. During an international leadership conference in London, Helena was invited to be the keynote speaker. The theme of her presentation was "From Silence to Leadership, a Personal Journey of Transformation." While preparing backstage, she remembered the woman she was 7 years ago, competent but afraid of her own voice. 7 years ago, Helena began her lecture to an audience of more than 2,000 executives. "My boss told me I was invisible. Today, I'm here talking to you about how invisibility is a choice, and how that choice can be changed at any moment in life." The 40-minute lecture received a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. After the lecture, Helena was approached by dozens of people sharing their own stories of professional invisibility. An executive from a German company said, "Helena, I'm 50, 2 years old, and I still feel invisible in board meetings. How can I change that?" Helena spent 2 hours talking individually with people who identified with her journey. These conversations confirmed something Helena already suspected. Her story wasn't unique. Millions of competent professionals around the world were living lives of chosen invisibility, wasting talents and limiting their own potential out of fear, lack of confidence, or simply not knowing how to properly position themselves in the professional environment. The decision to write a second book came during a coaching session with a client who reminded Helena a lot of herself at the beginning of her journey. Lydia was a brilliant 38-year-old engineer who had been promoted to manager but felt lost in the new Posey tie-in. "Helena," she said during the session, "I know how to do the technical work better than anyone on the team, but I don't know how to lead people. I'm afraid I won't be respected." Helena saw in Lydia a reflection of herself and realized there was an important gap in her methodology: how to make the transition from individual professional to people leader. The second book, Silent Leadership: The Power to Influence Without Shouting, focused specifically on this transition, combining leadership strategies with executive presence development. The launch of the second book coincided with the 10th anniversary of Helena's professional transformation. She decided to do something symbolic. She returned to the same cafe where she used to lunch alone during her years of invisibility. This time, however, It was for a business lunch with potential international partners to expand her consulting to Latin America. While waiting for her guests, Helena observed the restaurant's movement and noticed how many people seemed to be living their own versions of invisibility. Executives eating alone, looking at their phones instead of interacting. Employees at group tables, but clearly disconnected from conversations. She wondered how many wasted talents were sitting around her. The partners arrived, 2 businessmen from Mexico and a consultant from Brazil. And during lunch, they closed a deal to take the emergent leadership methodology to 5 more countries. Helena smiled as she signed the contract in the same cafe where, a decade ago, she could barely order the daily special with confidence. Helena Carvalho's story doesn't end here, because true transformations never end. They expand, deepen, and inspire other transformations. What began as a painful conversation with an honest boss became a journey of self-discovery that changed not just one life, but hundreds of other lives touched by her example. Today, Helena is recognized as one of the world's leading authorities on emerging leadership development. Her company serves clients in 15 countries. Her books have been translated into 12 languages. She has trained more than 1,000 consultants in her methodology. But what she considers her greatest achievement isn't in the numbers. It's in the letters she receives from people who found their own voices inspired by her story. The most powerful lesson from Helena's journey is simple but revolutionary. You don't need to wait for someone to give you permission to be relevant. Relevance isn't granted, it's conquered, not through arrogance or excessive self-promotion, but through the courage to show your value, share your ideas, and occupy the space that is legitimately yours. How many people around you are wasting their talents out of fear of being seen? How many brilliant ideas die in silence because their creators believe they don't have the right to speak? How many organizations are losing innovations because their most competent employees are also the most silent? Invisibility is a choice, but so is visibility. Helena chose to stop being a supporting character in her own story. She chose to use her voice even when it trembled. She chose to occupy her space, even when she felt small. She chose to lead, even when she doubted herself. And you? What choice will you make today? Will you continue waiting for someone to discover your value, or will you start showing it? Will you continue keeping your best ideas to yourself, or will you share them? Will you continue being invisible for the convenience of others, or will you claim the starring role in your own career? Helena's journey proves that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, never too late to find your voice, never too late to stop being invisible. But it also proves that this change doesn't happen by chance. It requires courage, persistence, and mainly, a conscious decision to stop hiding. Your transformation story is waiting to be written. The question isn't whether you have the potential to be more than you are today. You do. The question is, will you have the courage to show it? Oh, and if you really enjoyed the story and want to support this work, help me with a coffee on Ko-fi. Your contribution, no matter how small, makes all the difference in keeping new stories like this one being told.